In this lesson, we're going to be talking about SSL and TLS. So the first thing I want to do is I just want to get a packet capture going so that we can take a look at what is happening on the wire once we're done doing this little demonstration here. So SSL TLS is the secure socket layer or transport layer security. SSL TLS are all about doing encryption. That's primarily why we use SSL TLS. SSL TLS is primarily a session layer protocol. Let me just demonstrate here how we would do this. So I'm going to open up SSL and I'm going to use sclient connect, and we're just going to use Google because it's easy. And so I'm going to connect to port 443 at www.google.com. And what we can see here is the session beginning. You can see here that we are connected and we are doing some certificate exchanges. We're actually getting the server certificate here. We're doing an SSL handshake, and you can see that it's reading 1,772 bytes and written 316 bytes. So what it's doing is it's setting up this session so that it can do the encryption for this particular session. So there's an SSL handshake that is done in order to get the session set up. And the session has a number of parameters like which encryption cipher we're going to use and setting up keys for the session and a number of other parameters. And those all have to be done initially during the handshake so that both ends know what those parameters are so that the session can continue with everything in place on both sides and both sides basically speaking the same language. So I'm just going to issue a get here, and we can close the connection out and go over and take a look at the packet capture and see what that looks like. We're done there. Let's swing over and take a look at the packet capture now. I'm going to stop the capture first. I'm going to filter on TCP, and then we can take a look at what's actually going on here. You can see we're doing the three-way handshake. So that's the TCP portion here. So we're sending the SYN, getting the SYN ACK back, and then getting the ACK back in reply. So now we have the client hello, and this is really the session establishment. The client sends a hello, and you can see here it's using SSL version 2. The server actually replies using TLS version 1. The server sends back a server hello, and we're going to open this up. And the handshake protocol is just a server hello, and the version is TLS version 1. You can see a session ID here. So the session ID length is 32. We've actually got a session ID, and it looks like it's setting a cipher suite that it wants to use. Now the server is actually going to send a certificate to the client so that the client can do some verification, and also part of that certificate is the public key for the server. Now we do a client key exchange, and then we do a change Cipher Spec. That's the server sending to the client here. You can see the source is the Google server, and the client is the destination here, the 192.168.1.22. So we're doing a change Cipher Spec, and once we've done that, you can see it's changed the encryption, and what that really does is now we're sending encrypted messages back and forth. And so you can see there's application data, and it's encrypted at that point. So everything going forward from here is going to be encryption or encrypted messages unless there's a new sender that gets introduced in the middle of this, for example, a new server that's sending data to the client, or in the case where the client or the server needs to renegotiate something. But basically, the session is set up at that point, and then all it is encrypted messages back and forth. But you can see that there was a session establishment where there was some negotiation and a little bit of authentication as well with the certificate. That's how SSL TLS works at a very, very high level, and primarily we're going over it just to demonstrate it as a session layer protocol. and looking over very quickly the overhead that's associated with establishing a session in order to do the encrypted transfer of the messages, which is really what SSL is there to do, is to set up that encryption and then do the encryption once the session is established.